meant to make this video like 6 months ago, but I got sick, I'm sorry, whoops! When I was a kid, my very first console was the Nintendo 64. I remember waking up on Christmas morning one year to the sound of laser fire. Heading downstairs, I found my older brother playing Star Wars Shadows of the Empire on our brand new, used Nintendo 64. It was my first real exposure to the wide world of Nintendo games, and is probably why I'm still a die-hard fan of the company. I mean, I had several classics, like Star Fox 64, Donkey Kong 64, Pokemon Stadium, and of course, Mario 64. Unfortunately, I was a dumb kid, and I wasn't particularly good at that whole fine motor skills thing yet, so Mario 64 was just a tad outside my skill level. But I could read, and press the A button, which means I could play a very different Mario game. Paper Mario. As you can probably guess by these old labels on it, this is the same childhood copy of the game that I had, and I loved it!
It's perfect. It's perfecto.
This game was absolutely incredible to me as a kid, and in conjunction with Pokemon is probably why RPGs are still my favorite genre of game. It opened up the world of Mario to me. I wasn't just trying to get to the end of the stage, I was on a quest. The enemies weren't just roadblocks in my path. I could see how Bowser's influence affected the world and the people. All of this with a battle system that was simple enough for a kid to learn, but complex enough to offer a fair challenge. Then, in 2004, they made a sequel! Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door has always been one of my all-time favorite games. My brother recently made off with my copy of the original game when we carved up our childhood collection, so enjoy this 6-month-old footage from my old basement of me in the game. I think the reason I love Thousand Year Door so much is because it might just be the perfect sequel. Not necessarily a perfect game, but a near-perfect sequel. There is no part of the original Paper Mario 64 that was not updated, refreshed, or improved in Thousand Year Door.
See, this is a sequel. This is a fucking sequel.
Obviously, there is the graphic and sound upgrade you have from moving to a better console, but it goes so much further than that. The battle system was a bit more complex, with partners having their own HP stat, special moves having their own unique action commands, and the audience system giving you a way of generating more star power by performing moves with more skill. All of this while maintaining its relative ease to use. The characters all had more elaborate designs than the original, and often came with more elaborate backstories and motivations. Many of the villains and enemies were brand new designs that were never in any Mario game, paper or otherwise. Not just big bad named enemies either, but ordinary goons and monsters. The story deviated from the standard Bowser kidnapping plot to something a bit bigger. Tales of long-lost treasure, ancient prophecies, and demons. Even the world design was improved. While most of the chapters in the original 64 game were your standard video game affair, things like, Desert World, Lava World, Ice World, you get my point. Thousand Year Door got more creative. We had Monochrome Forest World, WWE World, Murder on the Orient Express World, and going to the gosh dang moon! I could gush about why I love the original Thousand Year Door game all day long, but that's not really the point of this video. Because Thousand Year Door wasn't the last Paper Mario game ever released. Super Paper Mario on the Wii was... well, it had a great story, and let's just decide to leave it at that. And then that was it. No other Paper Mario game since 2007, if you would believe it. Absolutely none. Not a single one. I don't believe there was ever a Paper Mario game again. There wasn't any. Please don't make me talk about them. Please don't. I don't want to. But we're back. Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door has officially been remade and re-released on the Nintendo Switch. And I'm only 6 months late to talk about it. Again, I'm sorry.
You're too late, Mario. I am now forklift certified.
Where do I ultimately come down on the remake? Is it an absolutely amazing remake, worthy of Game of the Year, 10 out of 10, all the way across the board? Or is it a horrible disgrace to what came before and should be completely forgotten? Honestly, neither. The Nintendo Switch remake of Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door is still a great game. Just not all that it could be. If you never got the chance to play the original and don't want to shell out the money necessary to track down a copy from a retro game dealer, the remake is still a fine way to experience the game. And this game that I've been loving ever since I first played it as a child. It isn't perfect by any means, but I am glad that the remake exists for no other reason that it gives people the opportunity to play this piece of gaming history, something that they might have missed out on in 2004.
I have to get there and return all the stolen artifacts before history is changed forever. Wow. All right.
But if you have the money and the means, the original GameCube release is still the best version of Thousand Year Door. None of the quality of life updates and improved graphics and sounds really outweigh its issues. It just doesn't quite measure up to the original.
Dreams and the opportunities that she was missed me.
The issues are all mostly minor, which is why I can say the remake is still a good option for playing the game, but they do all add up, including the big one that I want to talk about today, the script. For reasons unknown, the localization team behind the remake wasn't satisfied to copy and paste the script from the original game. In a way, that is somewhat admirable. That shows to me that they are taking their job seriously and not taking the easy way out. It would have been so easy for them, and they didn't. So, I'll give credit where it's due. That, I feel, was a good idea. Unfortunately, that means that there is a lot of substance that we lost in the localization process. Now, before anyone accuses me of making a mountain out of a Monty molehill, the majority of these script changes are absolutely fine and incredibly minor. I have probably played through the original GameCube game at least once a year for maybe the past decade, if not longer. And without the internet to point all these changes out to me, I legitimately think I would have missed most of them.
I can't see that.
Better now? Or now?
Well,
Better now?
it's getting there.
Or now?
I can't see anything.
The script changes are usually pretty minor, a word here, a word there. Some of them seem to be working under the intent to bring things more in line with how they were in the original Japanese version. Others, not so much. I thought during the lead up to release that changing the 3 Shadow Sirens to the 3 Shadows was a kind of dumb choice. But I had forgotten that in the original GameCube Japanese version, that's what they were called. They were either the 3 Shadows or the Shadow Trio, depending on how you want to translate it. Now, I know dunking on localization is quite popular online, but the thing is, when it is done well, it can actually improve and enhance a work. Some things simply don't translate, and a very great localization is able to keep the core of the work intact, but uses the areas that don't translate perfectly to come up with new and creative ways to enhance the original point of the original work. So, while some of the changes may be closer to the Japanese script, it does take out some fun jokes and makes for a somewhat lesser experience.
Life is good, but it can be better.
With that in mind, I'm going to list off some script changes that I feel make the remake script inferior to the GameCube version. One of my favorite minor gags in the original is Hooktail's sex. The giant dragon and first boss of the game is usually called it or he, which is gender neutral in English for an unknown sex, in the original English GameCube version, until you encounter the dragon's brother Gloomtail in the Palace of Shadow, where he gets mad that you killed his baby sister. The remake drops all pretense and makes sure that you know Hooktail is a girl right away. That is what it's like in most of the non-English translations of the game and the original Japanese. But like I said, localizers found a way to enhance the original work. it was a good, solid joke. I always found the gag pretty funny, truthfully. The image of this giant monster with little more than someone's baby sister got a chuckle out of me. Jerry, Luigi's Bob-omb companion, had his dialogue changed. Almost all of Luigi's companions join him as a joke. There is a sense of irony to the whole affair. Most feel dead set on some sort of retribution or reckoning with the lean green bean. Jerry's original motivation was that he was so horrified to see Luigi cross-dress as a bride, which is a hilarious statement out of context, that Jerry swore he'd follow Luigi to make sure he'd never do it again. In the remake, he just wants to stop Luigi from ever wearing heels since Luigi's clumsy. Cortez, the boss of Chapter 5, lost some of his jovial Spanish pirate accent. In the original, he would often end sentences with amigo and yo-ho-hos. The remake includes a lot more Spanish, but to me, it reads more like I'm watching an episode of Dora the Explorer than fighting a legendary pirate ghost. Cortez wasn't the only one who lost his accent. The Far Outpost Bob-ombs did as well. In the original, they were all Russians, with lots of das thrown into their speech. In the remake, you can see traces of their Russian accents at times, but it has been largely sanitized, which honestly makes the world building a bit less fun to me. Which brings me to my biggest complaint about the script and the focus of today's video, the Vivian Problem. It's just dumb. It's just dumb. It was a stupid decision. Nintendo of America's localization team should not have done this, and it flies in the face of the proposed idea of trying to be closer to the original Japanese text. What on earth am I talking about?
I'm gonna be straight with you. What the hell is happening?
That camera's broken, right?
Fubar, sir.
I have no fucking idea.
The partner character Vivian, who is initially an antagonist but switches sides to join Mario and crew in Chapter 4, was always referred to as a girl by every single character, and the game never alluded to anything else. Even in her capture card data in Super Paper Mario, Vivian is a woman. However, in the original Japanese game, the partner character Vivian was a man. It was kind of a gag that this clearly feminine-looking character was actually a dude.
What is a woman?
If you're a fan of a lot of Japanese anime and video games, especially from this time period, you've probably encountered a few similar characters. The one that comes to mind for me is Haku from Naruto. Nintendo is normally pretty sensitive to anything that might be controversial, especially back in the day. So when they brought the 2004 game to the West, the localizers just made Vivian a girl.
That makes sense!
So why then did they forget this policy and try to insinuate that she was actually he in the English version of the remake? When Vivian joins you in Chapter 4, there is one line that insinuates Vivian is a man who identifies as a woman. Oh boy, here we go. So, let's get into what Vivian actually is. The Japanese version for this type of feminine-looking man who likes feminine clothing is an otokonoko. It roughly translates to male girl or male daughter, and honestly there is a range to it like most cultural details like this. What it isn't is trans.
Madam Vice President. You and I both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking.
To define trans, because there seems to be some debate about this, I'm going to use this definition from the American Psychological Association, which defines trans as, quote, an umbrella term encompassing those whose gender identities or gender roles differ from those typically associated with the sex they were assigned at birth. That definition does not describe Vivian, and has never described Vivian. Vivian never identified as a woman in the original Japanese text. I probably don't need to explain this to a reasonable person with a functioning cerebellum, but Japan, as a different country with a different culture, does not have or follow our American/Western ideas of sex and gender. An otokonoko is not the same as what we in the West would define as a transgendered person. An otokonoko does not identify as a woman.
Oh, by the way, I'm a boy.
No one would act like an otokonoko is a woman unless they weren't in on it. but once they are, they treat an Otokonoko as a man. Again, let's look back at that Naruto character I mentioned earlier. Naruto initially calls Haku a girl until he is corrected. Then, Haku is only referred to as a man.
Ah! No way! He's prettier than Sakura!
It's now time for history class with Professor Landon-Core. Make sure you turn in your homework. That'll be 1 subscriber to the channel and a like on the video. As a cultural concept, Otokonoko first came into relevance in the early 2000s, so around the same time period the original Thousand Year Door was released. It became somewhat popular amongst internet and manga fans and subcultures, which generally has a pretty decent overlap with the type of people who would enjoy working for a video game company. Otokonoko derives from onnagata, male performers dressed as women for kabuki theater. So you see, back in the 1600s, women were banned from acting due to a large amount of prostitution associated with the Japanese entertainment industry of the day. The more things change, the more they stay the same. A play with no female characters can be pretty uninteresting though, so theaters of the day needed to make some of their young male actors pretend to be women.
Welcome to my life, Little Red Riding Hood.
The ban's effect on the prostitution problem is somewhat debatable, because they ended up having to ban onnagata, but that is beside the point. The point that we are trying to make here in our little history lesson is that the onnagata was a very big part of traditional Japanese theater.
The theater. What's happened to the theater?
The reason that matters is because theater and performance are a significant part of Thousand Year Door. It's one of the key aspects of the game. The audience system introduced in this game is not only a visual component, but a gameplay component. Multiple characters have performance as part of their background. Madame Fleury was a former stage actress. The Yoshi Kid joins you in a world based on professional wrestling. Even the secret partner, Miss Mouse, is a thief who puts on a masquerade mask so no one knows she is the lovable bad shop girl. Even the hidden lore of the game is revealed to you by a wandering storyteller. Another Japanese aspect to this is that the specific pronoun that Japanese Vivian uses to refer to himself is atai, which is a slang version of the pronoun atashi, which is used by, among other things, male rakugo performers. The entire game is telling us something, and for some reason some blind, illiterate localizers didn't get the memo.
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
There is not one thing in all of Thousand Year Door that has anything to do with men who think they are actually women. And if you still try to insinuate that it might be, you guys do know that even today, in the year of our Lord 2024, Japan still doesn't allow gay marriage? Are you really going to try to tell me that Nintendo, family-friendly Nintendo, would introduce a transgendered character in 2004? There are, traditionally speaking, a few different localization philosophies. Some localizers strive for a true one-to-one copy. Some focus more on connecting with the target audience in the new language. Nintendo has generally leaned towards the avoid controversy at all costs angle. Family-friendly entertainment is Nintendo's stock and trade. Please, I'm begging you, try and make the argument that they, in 2004, would intentionally make a transgendered character. It simply can't be done.
You can set restrictions based on a game's age rating.
The thing that annoys me about this whole line of thinking is that it just wasn't even necessary. There are other script changes around Vivian's storyline, but this is the only one that insinuates Vivian might be trans. I mean, I scoured the game for more lines like this one. I brought Vivian with me to as many big events as I could, especially ones that involved her sisters, to see if there was any further reaction. And as far as I can tell, this is the only line in the game that insinuates Vivian might be trans. And this whole thing does nothing but distract from the narrative. The script changes for the Vivian character arc tried to accentuate that she felt alienated from her sisters by their constant bullying, and wanted them to be a real family. The brother line throws a wrench into everything. It is a distraction, it serves nothing to the story, it disrespects the original Japanese translation, and it gets in the way of what would otherwise be an interesting story arc for this character.
No, I didn't say anything, actually. Shame.
Unfortunately, I am still a die-hard Nintendo fan, so they already have my money and my earthly will. I am incapable of not buying their products, tragically. However, this remains a significant misstep. I wish I knew more languages or people who played games in those languages so I could learn more about the localization in things like Spanish or German or whatever. But this is a very bad look for Nintendo's English localization department.
There was about as much cheering for this as there was when I hit my last free throw in my high school basketball career, and it was really only my parents clapping because we got blown out in that final game.
I actually still would be glad if they patched this out. It has no business being in the game. Localizers have no business putting their nonsense in games that don't already have them. I stand by what I said at the top, though. If you have the means, play the original game. If you can't, the remake still isn't a bad way to experience the game, but you should know that you're playing the inferior version of Thousand Year Door. The script changes aren't the remake's only problem.
You don't say. You don't say. You don't say.
Who was it?
He didn't say.
Most of those other problems are relatively minor, but there are so many of them that when you take them as a whole and add them all up, the GameCube original is still the best. Obviously, the weight of nostalgia is a lot to overcome for any remake, but just because nostalgia was on the side that won this battle doesn't mean it was the only point on that side. When I sit down to have the best time I can playing one of my all-time favorite games, it'll be on the game.